VCs and there's operators. I think there's an absolute black box between your VCs and your operators.
Today we've got Stefan jumping on. He's built and led partner programs at multiple unicorns like Pigment and Celonis. Most recently worked with founders on go-to-market at CG Partners. Today we unpack everything that changes at different stages of those growth journeys.
Biggest mistake, I think, as a founder, and I think it goes for bootstrap businesses, VC-backed businesses, services, product, is the fact that
What would you say, in your eyes, is the biggest disconnect that you see between like what investors expect and the actual execution of revenue activities?
VCs and there's operators. I think there's an absolute black box between your VCs and your operators. How many times in my years of being an operator did I ever have a VC speak to me? Never. Anytime I see in the office asking, interested in how the business is running, actually, no. It's only fed through the narrative of the founder. Never. So that it's a complete black box. Do they, I would say that I'm not for everyone, because there are exceptions, but for the vast majority of VCs, do they actually have any idea what it's like on the ground as an operator in their portfolio? I have no idea, personally.
What about the funds that have operator background? Because there are a few, right? That actually, that's also what's
again, they sit on a board, engage with the founder, and the founders are often, again, not every startup, absolutely not.
No, yeah, I
they're
get you.
super tightly controlling the narrative that was up to the investors. About the revenue figures, or about churn and headcount. It's like it's all really kind of it's microscopically managed so that I can manage the expectations and the narratives towards the investor. No, I've so often seen such a disconnect, massive disconnect from like what it feels like on the ground, what the traction actually is on the ground versus a kind of VC narrative, and it's just a disconnect. And often you get this kind of this artificial inflation of like top-down targets. It's like, oh, maybe you're 10 million ARR, and VC's like, yeah, like to be in top perform, you have to be 50. And it's like, all right, suddenly targets are 50. And often, and especially scale-ups, there's hardly any kind of bottoms-up planning that gets any merit relative to what's top-down. And it's arbitrary. And I think...
Is it arbitrary? Don't you feel like a lot of VCs are now starting to use real data to derive that? Or would you say that it's...
Not that I've seen. Not that I've seen. No, I've seen.
Okay.
I still think it's arbitrary. Yeah. I would say there is an absolute disconnect between operate. Like I say, until I really started to do my own thing, I think I'd maybe never spoken to a VC. So maybe 10 years of being an operator. I don't think I'd ever spoken to the VC.
But do you think that's a factor of like the whole triple, double mentality where it's like, hey, okay, for you to be the next Wiz or Cursor, if you, I mean, I don't even want to use that example because I feel like the AI multiples are through the roof. So like no one knows what good looks like. But
yeah, the point is that the comparison thing, it's like, we're focused on outliers, constantly focused on outliers. And it's such a paradox. It's like, hey, I can see VCs like, oh, I want to focus, I'm only investing in outliers. And here's how you identify outliers. I was like, all right, so you're focusing on outliers, but you're telling us there's a repeatable methodology to have an outlier. So if there's a repeatable methodology,
yeah, it's super.
It's a complete paradox. It's just proliferating this kind of BS. And it's like, no, I admire, I appreciate, I have nothing but respect for these incredible companies and outliers, but I don't think it determines what success looks like for me.
Yeah.
But that's not how VCs operate, right? Because the system is such that I need to invest in businesses that can return a fund. And so economics of it are such that I need you to do this and this and this. Can you do this and this and this? I need to like by the by. And so that you feel it as an operator, you get these kind of artificial and arbitrary kind of target setting and things. You're like, well, where the hell did that come from? And suddenly it's like, and then you get people that are that are hired on the basis of arbitrary targets and are fired on the basis of arbitrary targets. And you're just like, it's a very strange setup in a lot of scale-ups, to be honest, as an operator. And for some founders, just think about it. Like, we all know this game, which is I'm a founder. I need to kind of BS a bit and lie and inflate to be able to raise. The VC knows I have to do that and they're going to discount it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then the operators are just on the ground, just being real, just trying to just doing the best they can in their individual role. And they're subject to this weird dichotomy, which is, a very precarious control of the narrative that was up to VC And a VC doesn't really have any visibility on how the operators are actually operating. So it just feels like this big black box disconnect. And that's what I'm saying. It's weird. Like I had never spoken to VC. And it's
Yeah.
not like, and I'm not saying that they should be in or around the office every day, but over 10 plus years, I never even saw one. 90+% of attention goes on to this outlier. And it's like, oh, actually, whoa, look at this company, 1 to 200 million in a year. That's the benchmark. We need more of that. Oh, that's a fund return. Yeah, we need more of that. And the reality is that most people building businesses are that's not what is possible for them. Tell me from your perspective. I mean, do you have a view? Do you think there's a disconnect?
Oh, hugely. But I think I'll start at the tail end of what you were saying, which is it's sad because you have a lot of really talented operators. Now I'm biased for commercial operators, so anyone in like the revenue functions who have been burnt the last 18, 24, 36 months because of poor play VC. There are countless examples. I saw that there was a startup and they were doing really well. I think they were at like 50 mil or something. And then instead of being super open with their company about wanting to sort of like take the exit, the founders bounced, took their cut on preferential shares and then left. And it's funny, I had a guest on day before yesterday who said he joined the startup, spent about a year and a half there. It was probably the most promising team you could assemble, and value proposition / thesis statement was as on point as it could have been. But then most of the good people left, including him, just because there were a lot of sort of mismanaged expectations around even the nitty gritty of how were the shares pool structured and what they were promised over time of like, even if we don't sell the business or IPO, which obviously is a very small statistic of companies, that they exit. And so what this points to is like this really hardcore due diligence from the candidate side, in rightfully so, to say, hey, okay, like when I am talking to a startup, I need to be very, very crystal on how I manage their expectations and how they manage mine, because obviously no one wants to end up in a situation where it's a failed hire, but more importantly, this is someone's career, right? So
yeah, 100%.
I think it's even easier if you're experienced like you or some of the other people that we bring on the show. But imagine you're the first SDR. It's like, well, what should they know before they start interviewing? And I actually think one of the most common ways founders mess up on the first hire isn't necessarily to do with comp or, knowing. Like, I think it's because they have this candidate profile in their head, but they don't fully define what that should look like over time, and then be harsh with themselves of what are the must-haves versus what are the nice-to-haves, right? Let's say you're the early hire at a startup today. So knowing what you know now, what are some of the first few things that you do when you join a new startup on the block?
So early in my career, I did get the advice, which is, hey, if you go into a business, any business, regardless of the maturity of it, always ask yourself, how does that business generate value and where do you sit in that value ecosystem? So what's the value that I'm expected to bring to this business and how is it generating value itself? And that was kind of like just foundationally, how does it make money and how do I help that process? Now, depending on the maturity of the business, every company has their own circumstance, their own context. That's why I'm not going to give any kind of generalized BS because a Series A business, VC backed, sitting in Europe versus bootstrap business out in the Philippines, you're going to be met with a different circumstance and context. So what is the maturity? I've been looking at, right, what's the state of our revenue? What's the state of the product? So I go, right, let's go to the product. Let's go deep into it. What's the differentiation of it? What's the value proposition of it? Where are we in terms of traction? How much revenue do we have? What are the customers like? What's the ICP? Do we have a clear thesis on that? Is it proven? Because we always talk about, especially if you're in a venture-backed business, everyone wants to build for scale. It's like, yes, we'll build for scale, but to do that, we need to build repeatability in our revenue engine. And to have repeatability, we have to have some kind of measurable, driven, proven performance. And more often than not, when you go in and it's early stage, you're not repeatable. And you probably don't have it proven out yet. So it's about, well, how much traction do we have? And what's the delta to us getting to a point where we can actually start to be repeatable? And so these are the kind of questions I typically go in and ask. Is very much being a listener, because nobody has been in that business at this time.
So let's maybe zero in on the few startups that don't have a fully developed sales motion. Let's hypothesize that they're now starting to actually develop like a real go-to-market engine where they go out and win business. If you were like the first commercial hire, let's say under 10 million in revenue, what do you think are sort of the characteristics that set you up for success in that kind of setup?
Deep understanding of what you're selling. I would say hypothesis on your ICP and the speed at which you iterate. That speed of iteration, I would say, is more or less the recipe for the success. Because again, nobody's built what you've built in this moment in time. But when you look at the ICP, you want to narrow it down as much as you can to the minimum size at which it can be repeatable. Because you want to get the compound benefit so that every customer can potentially bring on additional customers. You've got one story that will compound into something else. The last thing you want is yeah, sure, you can be scattergun if you've got no idea, but that should be your first hypothesis. If you even pre-revenue should be on the product, on the differentiation, the pains that you know that you can solve and where it's differentiated, and then create a thesis of which persona can it help. I'm talking obviously from a B2B setting, not necessarily B2C, but the persona,
right.
all for the size of the company, which geography am I targeting, which industry, which segment, and I just try and narrow that down as much as possible so that it gives me the best chance to then create repeatability if it's right. And when I say the speed of iteration is that we have to know if it's working or not. And the first thing is like my message market fit. So if I'm doing outreach, whether it's okay, it could be content I'm pushing out, it could be just kind of outbound, it could be network. Is the message that I've curated on the solution pain fit resonating? And you'll get a sense of that in your conversion. If you're not converting into even meetings booked, or no matter how you're outreaching, then maybe it's the message.
Gotta go back to the drawing board.
Get back to the drawing board. And if you're getting the meetings and it's just not quite resonating, or they don't hold budget, or the pain isn't quite there, then is it the persona? So it could be one of a myriad of things. But let's say and I'm someone, like I'm corporate, I'm not going to stand and say, hey, you've got to measure everything. No, I don't have time for all that admin when I'm really early, but it's something that's often I think about all the time. It's implicit. I have in the back of my head. I'm like, look, this message market fit isn't quite right. We have to evolve the messaging. And I'll have some rudimentary stats on like what our reach is, how many meetings I plan to get. And so I have a sense of whether this is working or not. And I always have to have a sense of, is it working? Is it not? And then iterate. And I'll be honest, like either being a full-time employee or working early stage of businesses, I have not yet seen one that has hit it one for one. They all have a ton of iteration, a ton.
Narrowing your audience to the minimum amount so that it becomes repeatable. It's always super tempting, right? It's like even me sitting here recruiting for software startups, like what a big time. So if you think about like where you bring the most value, that's when I started going to the drawing board and saying, hey, actually, you know what? We prefer to work with software startups that have some sort of vertical application because then they go deep into that specific sector or industry. And I feel like a lot of startup founders, they fall into that trap, right? Where even if they're somewhat agnostic, they forget that, it might be wiser to start with a smaller audience and then expand from there.
Yeah, being opportunistic is great, right? When you're early, being scrappy has to be
with intent.
With intent, is exactly. You said for yourself, it's like, I'm sure you'll have geographies you focused on or geographies you don't focus on. I'm sure you'll have verticals that kind of work better for you than others. Even for us, it's like when we started doing some, let's say, call it advisory and services to early stage companies, what we do to support a business if they're, let's say they're VC backed and they're Series B or C or D, it's way different to what we'd be doing if they were a seed business or a Series A business. We're like, we can help companies with certain functions of the go-to-market if they're more mature, but we really like doing the kind of holistic go-to-market build if they're early stage. And we're like, well, we'll never create repeatability in our own business if we just keep scattergunning a little, dabbling a bit this, a bit that, a bit this, a bit that. So you have to kind of question, what kind of business are you wanting to build? So if you're planning to make it repeatable, to make it, then it's really about just doubling down and focusing on the ICP that works.
What's another common mistake that you see founders make? It could be through the clients that you deal with now. It could be from the past. Like, what do you think is like a really common one that people tend to overlook?
There's tons of mistakes you can make. I've made them. Loads of businesses have made them. And it's about, okay, is there one that's maybe generalizable enough? Biggest mistake, I think, as a founder, and I think it goes for bootstrap businesses, VC-backed businesses, services, product, is the fact that the comparison is a thief of joy. The moment that when you compare yourself to other businesses and it ceases to inspire you, you have to stop comparing. And the amount of times I've seen business that, founders compare themselves to another business, it influences the decision-making irrationally. Oh, but this company's doing this, so this how it should be. Oh, I've had advice from a guy that worked in a company 10 years ago that did this, so I should do this. It's like, the balance between being inspired and taking inference from comparison to then ultimately influencing your decisions is a really fine line. And I think that the amount of times I'm speaking to
It's a
founders,
really good one.
and honestly, like it's something that matters so much because we see, this is the reason you're doing this. You look on LinkedIn. And I understand it. I totally get it. And I advocate to a degree. Look at the messaging that gets put out from the network, from the ecosystem. The reality is that I see outliers generate about 90% of attention. And it's not repeatable. The circumstance that has often made these outliers successful is not repeatable. Or we try to make it so. But the rump and the majority of businesses that are operating, these outliers hold no relation. They hold no comparison that's useful. And they often influences. And companies that I use and I love and I've got huge admiration for, Cursors and Lovables and amazing companies. It's what they did, so this is what I have to do. It's like, but they're so different. What they're building is so different. The product's different. Where they're building from is different. It's absolutely no relation. We often, I've seen it with founders actually influence their operational decisions in a day-to-day. I'm going, yes, being inspired to take appreciation from those outliers, but this is the narrative that I'd love to see change, which is I'd love to see real businesses that are outside of those outliers, that are the rump, that are building without a tailwind, without a headwind. The majority are building without neither. They're just building, and the majority of spaces are in neither this headwind or tailwind state. And I think that stop comparing. You're on your own journey. You're on your own circumstance with your own context, and nobody's built from where you are, what you're building, whether bootstrap, whether VC backed, whether, and like I say, even we're celebrating all this investments and fantastic, but that's just resource allocation. Let's celebrate outcomes. And I don't care where it comes from. I don't care if business is, again, bootstrap, service, product, or otherwise. Your success is not determined by comparison of an outlier. Your judgment of success should be your outcome.
There's a fine line between comparison and sniping good ideas, right? Like everyone's talking about Cursor, Lovable, and I think there are some fundamental, I would say, tactics or strategy that you should take away as a founder. For example, be very vocal about the brand that you're building and why the value you're bringing to customers is there. I think Anton is a great example of that. Right? If anyone you speak to, at least from my network that I've seen, it's one of the first things they say that's great about him. And I think that in founder-led, like you've got to be relentless with how you message, because no one's better to do it than you. But I'll agree that oftentimes we see far too many occasions where the comparison brings them down. One thing you think founders should push back on more to their investors?
If they feel that a demand is irrational or unfair, push back and protect your people a little bit more. I don't know exactly what that'll be in the circumstance or context of the person or the business, but often, again, VCs are kind of often trying to help in a way, and they're trying to give through different ideas, and often they can say things that are kind of uninformed, or they'll expect things that are not fair. And I think that often I see founders are a bit timid, or I don't want to use scared, a little bit cautious around the VCs, and will just kind of there'll not be a filter to the operators underneath. They'll just pass it right through. Oh, VC mentioned partnerships as a channel we should look at. Right. We've got to figure out, I need a clear plan as to where we're going to invest, why partnerships are going to work. They suddenly create a lot of work. I'm like, God, settle down. Like, it's like what can often be a conversation turns into a huge amount of work as an operator. And I would just say, like, put people first. Operators, put them first. No, and it's really, really important, because we're the people that are working, slaving away to build the returns for you guys. And, we don't need a lot, operators. I'll speak on behalf of many. It's just a little bit of courtesy. I've spent way too much time building board reports and board decks and inputs for that. Way, or irrational. I need a number on the addressable market for partners. I don't know what. I just need to be big. Just make a big number and give me a lot of logic to it. It's not gonna move the needle with any performance. It's gonna spend hours doing this, waste of time, and it's all because they've asked about something. That sort of rubbish. Just be a bit of a filter, push back, have confidence in and trust that you can push back on sometimes unruly demands. And if you're an
Yeah.
investor, biggest piece of advice I can give is if you're genuinely curious on a topic or a function or in a business and you really care, just invest a little bit of time. Just go and ask. Say like, hey, I'm
Yeah.
curious about, say, we're public partnerships. Yeah, maybe I'm going to have a chat, if you don't mind, for half an hour with the partnership team. Or maybe I can come in and spend half the day with the team because I'd love to understand, like, allow a little bit more connectivity. Funny, we're talking about trust and we're talking about knowledge flow. And there's just often this facade, this narrative facade that exists in around the founder and VC and the board. And let's break that down a little bit.
I think that one of the things that founders talk about a lot, but maybe don't necessarily follow through with in all scenarios, so again, there are always exceptions, is opportunity cost. I think as any good salesperson, even if you're a technical founder, the big question you should always ask yourself for every decision that in some ways impacts more than just your scope of work is what's the opportunity cost, right?
100%.
Like, but bringing that back to hiring, I don't know if you've seen the same thing, but recently we've got what we've coined as the founding account executive or the pioneering sales hire. We've got founders hiring associates and chief of staffs, which I think these are all actually part of sort of the revolution behind let's keep teams lean and small. So I'm all for it. In general, like, would you say, like, when you're coming in that early, how do you know what the right motion is? There's so much noise, there's so much distraction. Where would you start looking if you come in and sort of the motion isn't fully defined?
If you go even one step behind that, I would say you want to stretch being founder led as long as possible. You want to really stretch yourself, maximize as much traction. Because I always talk about this founder's margin, which is that like if you're even outreaching as a founder, your reply rate will be higher. Your conversion rate will be higher than if you were just a first employee. There's always a
Yeah.
difference. You always get this margin. So you want to just take advantage. You said it yourself, and I completely agree. Like the biggest and best advocate for your business is your founder. And they should push it, and absolutely leverage it. I think that when you go into a business as a first hire, depending on how much traction that founder's had, then infers what I'm going to be doing, right? Because if you're going in really early because the founding team doesn't really have the go-to-market expertise, you're actually having to lay some more foundational decisions and frameworks early, such as maybe even creating the first thesis on the ICP and actually doing the first outreach and creating the first meetings and pulling together the first revenue. But if they have that traction and they have their few 100K or whatever it is in traction, for me, it's all about, again, how do I go from being measurable into being repeatable? And I would just be focusing on, okay, well, what works? Where's our revenue coming from? That's the first thing I always ask the question, like, so we generate this much revenue. Where's that coming from? Why are they buying? What is that ICP? How have you been converting? How have you been outreaching? And I like to just focus on what's working and then see what other opportunities maybe there's opportunities to exploit additional content-led marketing. Maybe there's additional opportunities in partnerships. Maybe it's impossible to say that for me, that first commercial hire should be asking those questions. It's about, well, what works? Why does it work? And how do I create repeatability in it? That's very simply what the remit is. How you do that is completely dependent on where the business is at.
Yeah. Talking about partnerships, I mean, you were part of the early days with developing that out from an alliance perspective with two very successful companies that I'd say pretty much cracked the code in some ways. Maybe a good place to start is like talking in the context of both the softwares that you were representing, right? Like enterprise heavy. Is there a signal that says, hey, it's the right time to start looking at partners?
If you can't sell your product yourself, how can you expect someone else to sell it? Simple, right? Some spaces lean more nicely to partners than others. And I will give examples. So I would say that, like, once you have, I would say, your product market fit, once you have that, what described as that kind of measurable performance improvement, and I guess, measurable performance, I would always start to look at, right, who sits in my adjacent ecosystem? So I mentioned the CFO's office, or let's say at Pigment, let's say I've got a planning solution, but maybe, we sit really nicely next to month close solutions, we sit nicely next to treasury solutions, we sit next to on top of the ERP, we sit with the technology ecosystem around us is really nicely complementary. We're sharing a very similar ICP, so there's quite a nice opportunity to bring some mutual business, right? But depending on the partner motion, I would always say you have to have a direct sales channel. If you're looking at this kind of referral or co-sell business, especially technology partners, you want to be able to have a two-way motion, because otherwise nobody wants to just have a feeder on their books. And I'll talk to that. So, in the case of Celonis, we're selling to these large enterprises. And I would ask the question, and I guess this is one of the foundational ones, go back to the beginning for whether I should partner, is that how do my buyers buy? How do they buy? And what are they buying? And what are their problem statements? And take the example, I'm a CFO, let's say Siemens, massive conglomerate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care. A Celonis, a ServiceNow, a Salesforce individual vendor, I've got foundational problems or challenges, profitability, cash flow optimization, working capital optimization. I've got foundational kind of challenges as a CFO. And I'd like to know, the role of people, process, technology. How do the vendors roll up into helping me address these big ticket items like profitability? Now, who do I turn to when I want to talk about or spar or soundboard this challenge I have with the profitability in my business? Look, there's no single vendor I turn to. I'll turn to my trusted advisor. Maybe it's McKinsey or an MBB. Maybe it's the Big Four. Maybe it's Accenture. Maybe it's one of these guys who can help and talk to my business right across. They've got the domain expertise. They know my business intimately. They understand the technology landscape. They understand my systems and processes. They can really talk to me and start to think, well, what are you trying to do? And often what we saw is there was the seed of the finance transformation. That's what we would see. And we're like, all right, okay. And what happens is I was like, well, how can we make it that we are like the number one tool in their toolbox so that when they're having these conversations with CFOs, that we're part of that narrative, we're part of the fix, we're part of the future, part of the transformation.
Yeah.
Because if we're not partnered with them, we're not part of the conversation. And the hardest bit for us was getting a seat at the table when we're talking these large, giant enterprises. So for us, that started really early, and it was a nice compliment because in and around an implementation, it's not just technology implementation, it's all the advisory and enablement and services that goes around it. And it's a kind of longer term engagement, especially these large enterprises. So for us, like that, we could have engaged with that really early, and we did. And so I would always say is that who you're selling to, understand how they buy. And the art of partnerships is really about building incentive alignment. Why would too often I get people going, yeah, partners what's the purpose of partnering? It's to bring pipeline. Full red herring, nonsense. It's nonsense. It's like, yes, that's one metric. Metric is with source pipeline. And then often we'll say, I want to partner with this technology company because they can bring me leads. And well, yeah, but what are they getting? Kickback. Really? Do you think they'll change the behavior of their reps because they're getting 10% of a referral? No. So it's like actually you've got to think more holistically about, well, what's in it for them? And that's what I always say is there's different types of partners, there's different motions. And, especially when we were co-selling at Pigment, we did this really well. It wasn't just about, referring business. It was actually, how does it impact our win rates? How does it shorten our sales cycle? How does it, how does it increase our average deal sizes? So we saw increase in average deal sizes, we saw reduced sales cycle lengths, and we saw increase in win rates. Because what happened was these partners were a trusted advisor to their business. So when they were bringing us in, we're working alongside them. They knew that business intimately. They had the domain expertise. They knew how to navigate the procurement and the buyers and the teams and IT, and they were kind of a trusted sounding board for us. And we had it was just a win-win.
Yeah. Could you give us an example, if you can, of like an early partner or a few of the early wins that you had there and how you won them? Like, how did you get their attention?
An early one with Pigment was actually with Deloitte in Belgium. And I mean, we were lucky in a way. It was quite difficult to crack the nut that is the Big Four. Highly matrix, complex organizations. They're already partnered with various systems and providers. So what we found is that, okay, well, they are partnered with lots of adjacent solutions to us, like Workiva and other tools. And what they're also partnered with Anaplan, kind of larger players. At the time, obviously Pigment was less mature, we were able to create an incentive alignment where we would help them segment their business. So they were looking at Anaplan and kind of enterprise space, but they had who were they partnering with for planning in this mid-market? Not really anyone. So we were like, okay, well, is there an opportunity here to service kind of less complex environments with a planning solution for Deloitte, and then for them to be able to build and wrap around service around that. And then they can not just one solution, they can provide a kind of wider transformation across different systems, which is, I mean, for them, it's a clear win. Now, again, obviously we were aspiring to sell at these large kind of enterprises. So you might on the surface go, well, what's the point of partnering with them if they're not actually meeting the kind of aspirational ICP that we're looking to sell to? getting your foot in the door. And I say with many partners, especially larger ones, it's very much just a large land and expand. So once you get into a bit like Belgium, you're suddenly able to speak with the UK or Germany or France or Netherlands and start to broaden your reach and build credibility. And what it did is that like we were very lucky. We actually generated leads. They brought business to us and we converted and we won and we got our first logos and they became lighthouse wins. It started to open the door to the wider Deloitte network, open the door to other opportunities, and other in the big four look at it and see, and suddenly it starts to compound. And that's what it did. And we did that pretty early, to be honest. Pigment was really very early in its journey. And that was, I give credit to Pigment for that. They didn't wait. Too often founders and businesses, they're like, I should really think about partnerships because every time I'm in sales cycles, these partners are involved there. Or every time, our RFPs are written, it feels like they're written for someone else. And I'm going, yeah, but probably. The Pigment want to get ahead of that. We're like, hey, well, actually, we know this space of planning is an older software space. It's well known, well defined. There's an existing partner ecosystem. We're kind of plugging into an existing ecosystem. And we just did it very early. With Celonis, completely different ballgame. We're building a category from scratch. I remember when I first joined Celonis, it wasn't even as early as Pigment. You talk about process mining and we're like, what's that? Firstly, I don't have a clue what process mining is. And then you're asking me I should budget for a technology I've never even heard of. Even though it's great, I'm like, it's completely different. And that was the same for partners. There was no such thing as process mining as a category. So for us, it was a massive front load on education, and the partner play probably took a bit longer to get to the maturity that Pigment did in relative terms. But then we had a bit of a domination of that space because we were the kind of really the main competitive vendor for a long time.
I'm not one to preach for frameworks, but do you have any?
Firstly, partnerships shouldn't really just roll up into sales. Partnerships is its own function. Partnership is the most functional function across the business. Engaging with product, marketing, sales, everyone, professional services. The reason I say that is that you have to have exec buy-in. If you're in as a first hire, why are your execs what are they wanting from partners? And it might be an education play at the beginning, because often they're saying, okay, I want pipeline.
Yeah, especially if you're in a new category, as you said, right?
But it's like you have to build the right the first thing I would do is get alignment with your execs and ensure the right education and understanding what's possible with partnerships. That's the very, very first thing I'd do. I couldn't stress it. It's more important. And from there, once you understand that, like it's educating them that there's different types of partner. So I can have consulting partners with like boutiques, RSI, GSI. Think of it like a matrix. I've got technology partners, those companies that sit adjacent to us, maybe cloud and marketplace alliances. Some even look at PE as a function. Then it's like, well, I can sell to them, I can sell through them, I can sell with them. And you just map out that matrix and start to think, okay, where are we going to focus? Because often you see founders like, want a bit that, a bit that, a bit that, a bit that. It's no, like you focus on one or two and that's it. That's all you should focus on to begin with. You can't put a resell motion. And also, so why are you doing it? So you might say, I want to have a resell motion. And so you go, well, what for? It might be that you decide, okay, well, actually, you know what? We're focused on Europe rather than kind of planting our seed and spending our millions opening up in the US or maybe going out East Asia. I want to open that market through resellers. So that's where you're going to put focus on your efforts.
A lot of people see it as this huge daunting task of like, how do I approach the AWSs and the Microsofts of the world? And as you said, right, it's about figuring out and mapping out where your value add is and starting from there, basically.
Yeah, look, different partners will do it at different speeds. And it has to marry up to your ICP, going back to it. Like, and your ICP evolves continually, right? So it'll be different in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, so on. But ultimately, like, who am I selling to? What's my solution pain fit? And just understand it to a T. And then it's about what is the right motion, right partners for us. And again, if you're selling within a specific vertical and you have a 25-person boutique that has great domain expertise, their ability to move is going to be infinitely quicker than an Accenture of the world. But you might say, well, the Accenture is the long-term strategic importance and I want to invest time and energy into that. But this is where I'm talking about education is really important because some people don't understand. They say, well, to build out a relationship with a GSI, you're going to take 1 year, 2 years to really start to get your in and mature and build your lighthouse wins. These are massive lands and can expanse, but you're not going to drive any in-quarter benefit by outshooting GSI. None.
Yeah.
Set that as your expectation. So I just
unless you've got a buddy there, then it always helps.
Right? Honestly, you'd have to have a really, really senior buddy, like a really senior buddy. Even then, even then. So that's the thing. Really simple, exec alignment, educate what's possible, build out your matrix, align where you want to focus, and create the right metrics. And the metrics shouldn't be just focused on referral. Look at what the impact partners can have in funnel, out of funnel. and then start to build your partnerships around that.
I'm gonna move us to a topic that I think we both have super strong opinions on. What's one operational habits that you feel every startup team should adopt from day one?
So anyone that knows me is probably going to laugh, because when it comes to hygiene and admin, and I am one of the worst. Yeah, operational habit. Operational habit that I wish I had would be the organization in and around my client calls, as I say, with potential prospects and so on. So I would say, my CRM hygiene, whether it's next steps, whether it's whether it's close dates, whether so on. That is super, super, super important. Now having insight from the other side as a decision maker and leader, that you realize that all these kind of raw data inputs are influencing my ability to make decisions. I need insights. I need to know what the trending conversion rates are. I need to know what products working, what markets working. So I need to understand to make decisions. And I'm completely dependent on individuals on the data entry, basically. So I would say from a business standpoint, I would say that very simple in and around sales, prospect, data entry into your CRM is critical, because it's the foundational piece to ultimately making any kind of rolling up to making decisions.
I feel like if most of these next gen CRMs were smart, they'd really try to productize based on the growth stage that the company is at. I think it's down to figuring out like how they can go as wide as they can to cover all the different end users, but starting with the ones that probably hurt the most. And in this case, it's almost always sales teams. That's my take on it.
Do you think that there'll be any kind of verticalization of CRM? So we see it with certain verticals have nuance and different requirements for an ERP. Maybe it's the same for CRM. And I was just
Yeah.
thinking the trend, which is we're seeing that the cost of building is lower than it's ever been. The accessibility to build a business is easier than it's ever been.
I feel like we already have. I just didn't think about it as deeply as now, because I mean, coming from recruiting, the sort of holy grail is Bullhorn, but Bullhorn is basically a CRM and an applicant tracking system. So those are specific to recruitment.
I think the really valuable nut to crack would be the migration from like Salesforce into the next generation CRM. How do you make that really
Yeah.
easy? And the example I give is like when I went from iPhone to Android, Android back to iPhone. The most recent time when I changed, it was so easy. It was so easy. They made the switching cost really easy. I literally
Yeah.
just download an app.
It's
And then they
actually
were
a
like,
really good analogy.
we'll just migrate your apps over. Don't worry. And I was like, imagine it's like I could read my Salesforce instance, see all the fields, and be like, yeah, no worries. Just we know exactly. We'll read how you're using your Salesforce. We see your users. We see the fields, but we'll populate all of that for you. Boom! Like here in an hour, there's your CRM. It's like I'm in my head. Like obviously, people that are more technical than me will be laughing. On a simple brain, I'm a super simple person. I'm like, it's really complex from Android to iPhone. It feels like.
No, you're
Sure.
dead right.
It's just tables. It's just a big database at the end of the day.
That kind of brings me to my favorite part, which is let's talk real about AI. What
Okay.
tools are you using day to day, and across like what specific use cases?
I'm using Granola or anything
Okay.
else.
Note taking.
No taking. We have used Firefly, Sana, TLDV. I mean, I'm sure they all have very similar, very competitive kind of transcriptions. Granola is just pretty seamless. It's really easy.
Yeah.
Using Lovable, actually, Lovable's super. Like if I have to build, let's say, landing page, or even it's just like visualizing something. I actually built a one pager just the other week. And I'm not a designer, but I found it's just a perfect bridge from like, hey, I have an idea what's in my mind. Yeah, sure, it's not going to be like great, but you just completely like shattered the silo that would exist between. Like it's incredible. So yeah, amazing solution. I use kind of OpenAI GPT for like my kind of centralized kind of knowledge repository. So I'll try to filter kind of funnel all my kind of transcripts, everything through there. And I have different folders. So for different, whether client activity, whether it's product, whether it's like, so basically it's obviously building its own context around. So I'd say kind of day to day, those are the three kind of big ones. What about you though? What kind of tools are recruiting?
Power user of GPT and Perplexity, both personal and professional. Yeah, Perplexity is good for like, because it's built into my Lemlist workflow on researching the startups that we want to go after. So it does a really good job of just summarizing like who do they sell to, so that when I'm reaching out, I don't like I look like I've done my homework. And then I think to build a layer on top of that, we're actually using Lovable now to prototype certain ideas we want to productize. Now, by no means are we ready to take them into production either, but we've had already a couple pretty good responses around, hey, like normally I get sent a shit ton of PDFs on a Google Drive that I have to look through one by one as a CV, and I just build landing pages for every candidate I share with a client. It's just so much easier, and it's like you can skim through it in 10 seconds and tell me, are the must-haves there, right? So are they in the right spot? Do they have the right seniority? Are they within scope of the package? Have they got the right experience? That kind of stuff. And we've recently started building an AI native version of candidate CVs. So basically what we've tried to do so far with a couple of people is clone themselves and train a GPT to become sort of like a representation of that person, so that if a founder wants to speak to a candidate without wasting their time, they could actually talk to their GPT version of the person and ask it the basics. So
It's a great way of filtering down. I've been around kind of either trying myself or startups for about 15 years. And
yeah,
when I started, I literally had pen and paper, drawing out examples.
wild.
Wild. Literally 15 years ago, I was at university, pen and paper, sketching out. It was actually an early idea for WhatsApp, really early. I had no idea. I had no technical understanding, way at my depth. Had a problem, which I was sitting in a university library. I was connected to Wi-Fi and I couldn't message anyone. There was no messenger. There's no WhatsApp. And I was going, this is mental. I was like, I'm connected to the internet. Why can I not send a message to someone? This is crazy, because I had no signal, but I had Wi-Fi. And so I started just trying to map this out. And I went to speak to an advisor about it. And he couldn't understand my, I understand the problem. He couldn't understand what I was like, my drawings. And I was like, in my head, I can't explain it to you.
Yeah, and now
Hey, I mean, like,
never been easier.
I could talk to GPT about it. I can even mock something up in Lovable. I could just, it'd be so much easier. The red herring is about building a kind of production grade software.
No.
But I feel like the kind of silo that sat between someone, simpleton, simple brain person like myself, and great engineering is now just completely collapsed. It's unbelievable. Like, I think there's never been a time, never been a better time to build a company.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm just gonna straight fire. So putting you on the spot,
Go for it.
like you're the founder of a VC-backed startup tomorrow. Let's assume it's B2B software, since that's what we've been talking about. 5 tools, non-negotiable. What are they? Let's assume like you've just assembled the founding team. You guys have just raised, but
Okay, well, firstly, my personal preference, I like it really basic. It's not a tool per se, but I'll sit on Google Suite, because like whenever I'm dealing with Microsoft, I think I die inside a little bit. And I think there's a noticeable friction in my day to day when I'm having to use Microsoft as a foundational stack.
what about
So
Notion? I feel like most founders live on Notion.
I don't get it. I understand. I see it. I'm using it a lot. It's just
Become almost the default for like knowledge
I've used it.
base.
I think it's just a bit too customizable for me. It's a bit more like, maybe it's the fact I'm a bit dyslexic. It's just too much text, too many
Yeah.
drop downs, too many clicks, too many. I'm like, I know it's a mishmash of like Word and Excel and PowerPoint, all this stuff thrown together. But if you put it down to my head today, I'd probably take Attio, or HubSpot. Attio or HubSpot. I'm not married to it. Especially when you're at the very beginning, the switching cost is not terrible. So I'm not married to it.
Yet.
Yet.
Yeah.
That's true.
You've got 3 more. Yeah, you've got to have a note taker. That
No,
for me, that's
right now, Granola.
I don't even remember the last time I typed during a meeting. So
No, actually, I've had this desk for a while, and I have this is like actually quite a number of years. I've had the desk that I'm at. I've got 2 notebooks that are still in their seal. I've never had to use, not used. As a reminder, I've no pen in sight. I say, okay, so Google Suite, yes, Granola. Okay, so let's say integrate Gemini. Yeah, I'd for sure be Lovable. I would say I'd encourage everyone to use that, even for idea sharing between people. Or you've got an idea, you want to mock up a website, right? Everyone spend half an hour, blah blah blah, throw your ideas in. Like I just think that's like it's an absolute hack to
yeah,
especially early stage.
I agree.
All the time, get what's in your head out there, for sure. And then the last one, actually, it's not an AI tool. It was Slack, Google Suite. Slack, Granola, Lovable, and Attio. Yeah.
What's one use case that you think is overhyped and one that's underrated when it comes to AI tools?
I think the way that you use AI is more important. Like, I think it's great to help you formulate ideas, but like I run from a country mile away, I can see if something's kind of AI generated. So I would rather say that yeah, like kind of AI generated content, I would say is a little bit overhyped to me.
I think it's good at repurposing content. I had someone on the show yesterday that said that, like, repurposing versus replacement, right? It's very different. Like, if you're going to use AI to draft up your content is very different than if you're going to say, hey, okay, these are my ideas.
It's great for like pre-production and ideation. Absolutely
Yeah.
amazing. I think that it's probably overhyped, the idea that AI can provide today great quality production level content.
Yeah.
Because it's hard for me because I'm a massive advocate. I love adopting new tools. I love it.
Yeah.
I love trying them out. I love challenging status quo. And sometimes I see the direction it's traveling in rather than what it's capable of today. Because there were certain things that just was rubbish at 2-3 years ago. Even the initial like AI recorders were not so great, especially when you've got an accent like me. What about you though?
I think underrated Notebook LM. Notebook LM will do everything from summarizing and categorizing all the files you've stored down to the conversations that you've had, and in between. So like you can use it for research predominantly, but like let's say you want to check if the last time you spoke to this person or you stored someone's file was within the last 6 months, like you can fact check that pretty clearly and show you the exact quote or source of where you had that conversation in mind from. You can also use PDFs like YouTube websites, all this stuff, and it'll summarize them. And it'll actually, basically, I think where they want to go is they want to build a knowledge base so that as you grow your drive, that it becomes more predictive rather than reactive. And so it's like, oh, hey, Nav, like you watch a lot of podcasts about venture capital. You should check out X person's channel.
Interesting.
It's not there yet, but Notebook LM for sure.
I
Obviously, for me, someone that's always on call, I can't live without a note taker. So I think that one's perfectly rated.
would agree. I would agree. What about overrated?
I more specifically want to say that like all these like AI powered features behind Outbound, so actual writing the copy versus giving you the basis or the signal for which says, hey, you should reach out to X. 99% of the ones I've seen are spray and pray. Like it's too easy to sniff. And as you said, like most people are a bit allergic to it.
Yeah, actually, I
So-
was going to mention that, but I think that there's going to be an acceptance now about where the reality of them. Like I think for me, when it comes to outbounding tools, the classic 11x, Artisan, the kind of proponents of how you just replace your kind of BDR, the SDR team.
yeah.
I mean, like nonsense, in my opinion, right? Absolute nonsense. But I think that's pretty widely accepted now as nonsense. I think it wasn't maybe 6 to 9 months ago. As opposed to like Topo and Apple Market, who have is very much your BDR plus AI is a better BDR.
I was just going to say, I think Dan and his team are the exception because I've worked with them and like their messaging is totally different. Yeah,
the
yeah.
messaging is on point. Like, I have to say, it's a great team. They've got great results. Yeah, I'm a bigger proponent of what they're advocating rather than selling this kind of pipeline dream that, a BDR can take perfectly great qualification calls if it's an AI rather than if it's an individual person that doesn't understand the context of the person or even build rapport. Because like little things like if you got a call and you got 5 minutes with someone, and you'll know this, right? Is building any degree of rapport is so important. The last thing people want is, if I'm picking up the call, I know it's transactional. The last thing I want is to make it feel transactional. And I think that's there's an art to it.
What's something you would do to make yourself twice as useful to the business that you're joining?
Yes, it's a good question. Twice as useful is a lot, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I've thought about the career advice I would give myself if I went back, things I might do a bit different. But yeah, like I think I didn't know that the communities that existed within go-to-market, and there's amazing communities of people. I think in Europe we've got kind of a challenge, which is that we really love to go on about the centralization of London, Paris, and like Berlin as places to build. So I never even thought that being based in Edinburgh, being outside of these hubs, there would be the opportunities to network and connect, and there'd be other people like me building and commercial. And I think that I would and I was given the advice early on in my career, and advice, wrong, terrible advice, but they were like, "Hey, you'll never make a success of yourself in the UK if you're not in London." And I think that it starts to, like, that's a chip on the shoulder. You still want to win against that, but the reason I give that as context is that I probably didn't believe there was the opportunities to network and connect with people like-minded and learn from other people that would have expedited how useful I would have been in the business, even from a tooling
Yeah.
perspective. Now, what tools are you using? How are you outbounding? I had no idea how to do anything. And I didn't really have any network, and I never really spent the time to invest in network outside of the business. And I think that if I go back the very beginning, first 2 years, I would have done that because I didn't have a clear mentor. That investing time outside would have been great. Just building your communities, building your network, and just being a sponge and learning from as many people as you can.
Super underrated.
And I'm a very open, kind of transparent person, and I love to make people feel empowered. Really, really important. And I think that one of the ways you can do that is just with knowledge share. And I share everything with exception rather than the other way around. And I think that there's a way to get people invested in and bought into the journey with wider context for the good, the bad, the otherwise. And it's a pet peeve. Like, people say, like, "Oh, you need to earn my trust. You need to earn trust." I hate that. No, like, the moment you hire someone, they've absolutely got all trust. Trust could be
Yeah.
broken, but you got trust. I think so. Share, invest in them, invest in people, get them bought in, share with them, be human. Like, it's free, costs nothing.
It's funny. Maybe you were born as a recruiter in another life, because one of the mantras they preach in recruitment agencies is it's easier to break trust than to earn it. And it's true, right? Like, we're all trying to sell something. If you're on the front line, it's just about being super clear about what the sell is, and if that sell is actually genuine and comes from a place of like pure value versus transactional selling. And it comes back to everything we've talked about: partners, direct sales motion. Thanks for jumping on. I appreciate you.
I mean, unfiltered is what you wanted. So, I really appreciate you having me. It's great to have the kind of open conversation and lift the lid a little bit on what life is like as an operator underneath. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Legend.